Thankfully, Oxford does not care if you're well-rounded. They care mainly about your academic excellence.
Hi everyone, for those new to my channel, I am Siam Shoaib Noor, a rising senior at Harvard studying applied math. This is a series where I interview amazing applicants who got into top universities. If you want to get a video on your favorite university or your dream university, you know what to do. Follow this playlist, and how you can do that is subscribe right below and smash that like button so that we can defeat the YouTube algorithm and you get those videos as soon as they're published. After my last two interviews on Harvard undergrad and Harvard masters, I got a lot of requests on getting into Oxford undergrad. And that's why I present our today's guest, Zaid Idris, who is an Oxford undergrad who just graduated. So without any delay, Zaid, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Zaid Idris, and for the last 3 years, I've been studying as an undergrad at the University of Oxford. My degree was on PPE, which stands for Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, all packaged into one. It feels wild talking about the pre-university preparations and strategies after so long, but I would definitely have appreciated some pointers when I was applying. So I'm really glad that Siam's taking the time to make all of these. Hopefully, others won't have to go through what we went through.
Thank you for your introduction, Zaid. Let's talk about the next item on our list, which is standardized exams. What were your standardized exams? Which ones did you give? What were your scores in each? And how did they help in your Oxford application?
So when it comes to standardized exams, there are three main things to talk about. Board exams, English language requirements, which are not as important as a lot of people think, and Oxford's admission exams. So for my board exams, I took O-levels and A-levels. Unlike the US and other countries, the UK universities and especially Oxford mainly just care about your academic performance when considering whether or not you're a worthy applicant or whether or not you're going to get an interview. So this part of the application will be one of the most important sections. For me, I took 11 O-levels, 10 A-stars and 1 A was my results, and 6 A-levels. Well, 6. It was mainly 5 A-levels, which I took up to A2, and 1 A-level, which I just took up to AS, which was further maths. And I got 1 A-star and 5 A, right? The subjects were math, further math, biology, chemistry, physics, and economics. In O-levels, I got a world highest in accounting and country highest in further maths, but I got nothing similar to that in A-levels. Like, I'll explain what happened with my A-level results afterwards. So for Oxford, they care a lot about your IGCSE results and your O-level results because apparently they are a very good predictor for how well you're going to perform in university. Apparently they've studied this and have been seen, so they give a especially strong weight. So because my O-level results were quite good, this ensured that I was quite competitive and in my application, at least for this part of the application, and it definitely kept me in the running. I think it's worth mentioning here that if you haven't done A-levels, all hope isn't lost. They also accept IB, International Baccalaureate, as does most places in the world. But I want to address the more important group, people who took SSC and HSC. Oxford does not accept SSC and HSC as board exams. They won't accept the result as reflecting how strong you are. So you've got to find an alternative. I think the easiest and best alternative in Bangladesh for SSC and HSC students is the SAT and SAT subject test. They require both. If you're using this as an alternative, they will require both SAT and SAT subject tests. I also gave the SAT and SAT subject tests. I got a 1570 out of 1600 in my SAT and a 2400 out of 2400 in my SAT 2. The subjects were math 1, physics, and chemistry. But I didn't actually end up submitting these, and so they didn't help my application. And the reason was because Oxford's application deadline is October 15th, and I gave my SAT at the beginning of October, and then SAT 2 at the beginning of November. So by the time my results came through, my application was over. But they would have definitely been competitive results. There are minimum requirements for SAT if you're going to be giving this as your main qualification. SAT, you have to get at least 1470, and for SAT 2 subject tests, you need to give at least 3 subject tests and you need to get at least 700 in each of them, and preferably these subject tests are somehow relevant to the course that you want to study. So that's board exams. O-level and A-level is what I gave. I gave pretty good O-levels, which helped me stay competitive, and IB and SAT are valid alternatives. Next, what was it? English language requirements, right? I gave the IELTS and I got an 8.5, but this did not help my application at all, mainly because Oxford has an interview system. So after you've given a competitive enough application, they're going to ask you to come in for an interview, either on Skype or on, in face-to-face, and then based on the performance in that interview, they're going to accept you. So in that interview, your command of the English language becomes very apparent. So like your IELTS score won't move the needle one way or the other. Like in my case, my college, I think forgot to ask me for my IELTS result, like my official IELTS result. Only after I got my acceptance letter did they mail me and said, "Oh, bro, can you send us your IELTS result, which you said was 8.5, because we need to have it in our books." And they were like, "Okay." So yeah, English language requirement, you need to give it, but it's not, it won't move the needle. Finally, Oxford's admission exams, and these are one of the most important exams that you're going to take if you want to get an interview. This is one of the biggest factors that they consider. This might be the biggest factor that they consider when looking at an applicant, right? So Oxford's admission exams change based on the course you're taking. So for example, for PPE, I had to give the TSA. For math students, you need to give the MAT. For biology students, I think you need to give the BMAT. So changes for different people, and in my experience, the TSA was one of the harder standardized exams that I've given. Well, one of the harder before my Oxford finals. Yeah, so the TSA is difficult, but as with many standardized exams, they've got past papers online, so as long as you focus and you practice those past papers and have diligent self-study, so you're not just practicing the past papers, you're trying to improve with every past paper. You're not trying to make the same mistake that you did in the last exam in this exam. So if you work diligently like that, you can definitely do well. I don't remember what my score in the TSA was, but it was good enough to get me the interview, right? So that's, I think, all when it comes to standardized exams, right? Yeah, that's everything.
Thank you for sharing them. Let's talk about academic results. Which academic institutions were you a part of to grade 9 and 12? What were your results and how did they help you in your Oxford application?
Right. So academic institutions, until my O-levels, I was Lakewood Grammar School. And after my O-levels, for my A-levels, I went to Mastermind. And so for the ones that are usually asked for, like in the US, it's like class 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. What are your grades in that? For Oxford, interestingly enough, it doesn't really matter too much because you're only giving your O-levels and A-levels. And so they don't really care what you did in your mocks or your class tests or your transcript, really. They just care about the O-level and A-level. Personally, I was I was a pretty good student up till class 10. I was extremely diligent, hardworking. My O-level results were a result of me being as diligent as I was till O-level. But then in A-level, like AS, I did really well. I think I did, it was quite good, I think. But since I ended up applying right after AS, so the October 15th, that comes right after my A2 starts, right? That's when I ended up applying. I got my interview offer in November, gave my interview in November, and found out in January 15th that I was accepted. And once I found out I was accepted, my offer was like 3 A's. And so because my AS results were quite good, I was like, I could work really hard to do really well in A2, but what will I get out of it? So my mother wasn't happy, but I relaxed quite a bit, and that's why my A-level results aren't as good as my O-level results. But again, that didn't affect me. That was a judgment call I made. I wouldn't recommend this to general people because like your A-level results aren't just for your university. They will appear on your CVs at some point, like at least up till you've in your education part of your CV always is going to come up. So it looks worse, my A-level results now, but I was lazy at the time. Right? So, but yeah, my academic institutions didn't play too big a role in my application to Oxford.
Moving on to extracurricular activities, what were your major types of extracurricular activities? What were your biggest achievement in each type? Any special stories about them? And finally, how did they help in your application?
Extracurricular activities, the bane of all Bangladeshi students who have no idea what to put in for this because they've done nothing else but study most of their life, and they're like, and then they find out at the very end, oh my god, apparently I need to be a well-rounded individual for universities to like me. Thankfully, Oxford does not care if you're well-rounded. They, again, as I said at the beginning, they care mainly about your academic excellence. So your ECAs aren't a big factor, actually. I didn't have many ECAs. Like I worked with the community service club in my school in Lakehead before, and I was part of the student council. Didn't get much things done, but my main ECA activity started once I entered A-levels. So once I shifted to Mastermind, there was a debate club in Mastermind, and I think that's where it was really my calling. I ended up doing quite well in debating, even though I started quite late. It was a tough start. I started like my first my first tournament. I got like 89th. Like I was. They rank in debate tournaments. They rank how good a speaker you are at the end of the tournament. I was like placed 89th. But by the time I graduated from high school, I was consistently getting first place in debate tournaments. And my biggest accomplishment, I think, that I'm still proud of to this day, was being able to make it to the national team for the debate, World Schools Debate Championship, and I was able to represent my country. But again, does Oxford care? Does Oxford care about these ECAs? I did debate for my own personal joy. Like I really cared about it, and that's why I did it. I didn't do it for ECA as a thing, and I think that makes it easier to really commit to something like that. But the way I was able to put this into Oxford was that they care about ECAs only to the extent that they sort of prove or amplify how well or how much you care about your subject. So my subject was philosophy, politics, and economics, and debate often deals with things which are philosophical, political, and economical. So I was able to integrate debate into my story, sort of, that I presented to Oxford, that I not only cared about these two subjects, but I cared about them in a demonstratable way, right? I talked about them in debate. I cared and presented how much I cared about them, and was eloquent enough in how much I cared about them that I was able to do well in debate. So that's how I sort of integrated it. If I wasn't able to integrate it like that, it would have been pretty much irrelevant to Oxford, right? So that's also why my little amount of community service, I also worked with another extraordinary Stanford student, Labib Tazwar Rahman. I worked for his NGO Inclusion X, which helps teach autistic children and children with Down syndrome how to use computers and get proficient in it. And that was extremely, again, another fulfilling experience, but not relevant to my subjects, and so did not play a huge role in my application and didn't move the needle one way or the other. Right, so that's my ECAs. I don't think obviously you want ECAs if you're trying to get a well-rounded application and you're planning to apply to other things like the US and other places, but if it's just for the UK, I wouldn't stress too much about it. And the way I would stress for is to get relevant ECAs for your courses. That's what really will make you a more interesting applicant.
Let's talk about your essays now. What were your essays about? What did you focus on? Any special story and advice for people going to write that Oxford essay?
Right, so the Oxford application essay, right? So all of the UK's applications are done in one sort of singular system, and you write one essay to send to all of your universities. So this wasn't just my Oxford essay, this was my essay to all UK universities that I applied to, like LSE, Warwick, and some other things, right? So the main thing that differentiates the UK essays from other essays like in the US and whatnot is that you're given a lot more leeway in bragging, right? Because the essay is really supposed to bring out your academic brilliance and your devotion or interest in the subject. That's really what they care about, as I've stated multiple times. So and I think as I've stated before, I couched my essay in terms of debate, right? I think I started with the idea of how, when I began my debate journey, I was extremely nervous, which is true. I would stutter a lot, which is true. But as I became more involved, I started grappling with thoughts that I had never considered before, things like in normative ethics or the implication of political shocks and things like that. And that I framed as the spark of my interest in things like philosophy, politics, and economics. And you don't have much to work with in the UCAS essay. I think it's like 600 words or so. So you really need to make very good use of your word economy, right? You want to pack in as much as possible. This is slightly easier if you're taking obviously a course which is specialized to say you're just studying chemistry or biochemistry or you're studying classics or something like that. But since my one was philosophy, politics, and economics, I really needed to be extra sure that I wasn't wasting any words because I needed to touch each of those sort of disparate topics, right? So you want to talk about what drives you towards those subjects, but you also want to provide evidence that you're good in those subjects, right? You want to any academically good thing that you've received. Like, for example, I was first in the National Physics Olympiad category A, so that's like the baby version, but I had it, right? And so I wanted to present this as like proof of my mathematical ability, which would be relevant to economics, right? So use whatever you've done in strategic ways to amplify the points that you're trying to make, right? Just because you've done something doesn't mean it deserves a place in that essay. It needs to be strategized and it needs to be used tactically, right? And so word economy is the most important thing, and then ensuring that you're able to couch everything in a way that highlights your excellence in those topics and also highlights your interest in those topics, so that you're not just someone who's going to do it and sell out, even if you are someone who's just going to do it and sell out. They want the people who review these applications are academics, right? They care a lot about their subject and they don't want to make, unless it's like something specifically like business, they don't want to see someone who just seems to care about it only superficially, right?
Moving on to a critical component of your application, which is recommendation letters. I would like to ask you, who wrote your recommendation letters and why did you ask them to write the recommendation letters for you?
Recommendation letters. So recommendation letters are also an important part of your, oh my God, I feel like I'm saying everything is an important part of your Oxford application. Like there's levels of importance, like AS is not that important, O levels are quite important, your Oxford admission. This is like halfway between, because Oxford tutors won't be able to get a full picture of who you are. And since there's so many competitive applications, they do require a full picture if they decide to choose you. So a recommendation letter helps in that aspect. And because I knew the recommendation letter was going to try and fill out the parts of my life that don't come through in my essay already, like I've already talked about my grades in my essay and in my application. I've talked about debate, I've talked about other kinds of academic things that I've done, right? So I wanted to choose someone who knew me, right? And I know there's a tendency in Bangladesh, at least I won't name names, at least in some places, some people write their own recommendation letter and then present it to their teacher to rubber stamp it and then send it off. Sadly and thankfully, I'm quite thankful for it, I didn't choose that route for my Oxford applications. I contacted and asked the principal of my first school, Lakehead Grammar, because I was there from nursery to class 10. And so there were two main reasons for this. Number one was that I knew Lakehead was a smaller school. And since I was one of the better students and I was there all my life, even though at the time of my application I was in Mastermind, she knew who I was, right? And so she could give a more personal picture of who I was than someone who was in Mastermind who'd known me only for 1 year, right? So that's one of the main reasons I chose her. She would be able to fill in that gap about in my application and the picture that I was trying to present to Oxford that wasn't being covered already by my essays and my results. And the second reason was that I knew, since again Lakehead was a small school and that most people don't ask their principal for the recommendation letter, they're relatively more free, right? They don't have like 50 recommendation letters that they need to write, like start churning it out. A lot of teachers who have so many applications, unless you're an exceptional student who has a very intimate relationship with them, they will be like copy pasting things, giving a cookie cutter version of things. But I know, for example, for Leica at that time, I was the only person who was asking her. So I knew she had the time to work on it and present it, which was another positive. So those are the main reasons that I chose who I did.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. This brings us to a final section of our interview, which is overall final advice. If you want to apply again, if you could apply again, what would you do differently? And what are some best tricks, tips, hacks you have for students who are going to apply now?
All right, tips, tricks, hacks, and what else would I have done differently? Quite a lot of things. All right, I'll try to cover the things I haven't covered here that are, I think, super important for you to know for Oxford. First thing was that if you are an SSC and HSC student and you need the SAT and SAT2 subject test to apply for Oxford by October 15th, they've got one of the earliest deadlines for applications among any universities I've ever checked. Like they don't consider anything that comes off after October 15th. And as I said, I gave my SAT in October and then SAT2 in November. Obviously, since I had A-levels, I didn't need to worry about the SAT results coming through for it. But if you're an SSC and HSC student, you will need to worry, right? So if you're planning to apply for Oxford, you need your SAT and SAT2 results to be there before October 15th. So you could send them over. So you've got to take it in one of the earlier sessions. So if you're planning to apply to Oxford on your last year, you need to have done it the year before. Or I think there might be some, I can't be sure, but I think there might have been also some slots in May or something like that back when I applied. It's been so long. So that's one of those things, you need to be very clear about your timeline. The second thing that I want to talk about is British Council. British Council is not helpful, and you will need their help to sit for your TSA, MAT, BMAT, whatever Oxford specific admission exam that you'll need to sit for. And the reason I say they're not very helpful is because I helped a few Oxford students the year after me and the year after that, and they had the same problem I did. British Council simply does not get enough people applying to Oxford to completely know what the system is. They need to do this once a year, only for like 10, 11 students. The whole system is extremely clogged up. A lot of the receptionists don't even know what you're talking about. What is this exam? Never heard of it. So you need to email like people higher up. You need to email everyone early, because on the Oxford website, they said that the last date for registering for these exams is October 15th, which is their deadline. Don't work on that assumption. For me, they said the deadline was October 8th. So I was messaging them a lot, talking about, okay, bro, I need to know how to apply. When is the thing? When are you going to, when do I pay the money? What forms do I fill up, etc. And I was in constant communication with British Council on email, and they just didn't know anything until they mailed me saying, okay, this is how much money. Of course, we give this exam, like complete change of tone. And they said the deadline is October 8th. One problem, they gave me that email on October 8th. So I had to print the form, take the money, and leave the house immediately. I started filling out the form in the car, and British Council closes at 5. I think I submitted my application to do that exam at 4:50 p.m. So 10 minutes later, British Council closes. I miss the deadline, never apply for Oxford admission exam, miss out on the Oxford admission exam, and obviously I don't get the interview and I don't make it anywhere. That's how close it was. So British Council is one of the biggest pains that you're going to be aware of. You need to start contacting them as early as possible. The year after and the year after that, I had like some cases where people forwarded me emails saying British Council says that the deadline for this application is September 16th. And that's like 1 month before the stated deadline. And they're like, did I miss it? And I told them that, no, you need to get some people who are also applying and then just go to the British Council office and then just demand, like, bro, this is according to you guys. you're supposed to take these applications until October 15th, but you don't want to go into the hassle if you can avoid it. Start messaging maybe in September, like, and just get it out of them when your application is, just so that you avoid it. Maybe it's improved in recent years, but like those few years that I had to deal with were absolute horror. So first point, second point, third point was that I didn't talk about is your Oxford interview, right? So after your application, they're going to contact you in November whether or not you've been shortlisted for the interview. If you haven't been shortlisted, you don't make it. If you have been shortlisted, then becomes one of the most daunting parts of the Oxford application process, which is getting to tell them, bro, I need a Skype interview because I cannot afford to go to UK for this. If you can afford to go, go. They prefer it. They feel like they can get a better judgment of who you are if you go there. Their body posture or whatever, I don't understand it. But most of the colleges do allow for Skype interviews. And so you've got to tell them early that, bro, I need a Skype interview. And then in your Skype interview, you're going to be accosted by a few tutors in your college who are relevant to the subject, and they're going to ask you some questions. You can look up how Oxford interview questions look like online, but this is one of the places where I think my background in debating helped a lot. Because in debate, you need to talk, think on your feet, you need to deliver arguments or deliver points of view eloquently and convincingly and succinctly, lots of English words. But yeah, and debate helped me a ton in going through that interview. I think personally that I did quite well. One of the biggest pieces of advice, if you end up being one of those applicants who go through this whole process and make it and get to the Oxford interview, is that always speak out loud, because they will ask questions that you don't know the answer to. Like, there's no way you will know the answer to. And even if you know the answer, they will push you to a point where you won't know the answer anymore. Like, someone asked me in my interview, like, if a person with 1,000 head of hairs has hair and isn't bald, but someone who has no hairs is bald, does that mean, at what point does someone become bald? Do they become bald if they have just one hair? How would you justify that line? And like, this is one of my philosophy topics, and there's what they're hinting at is a much more elaborate philosophical problem that they guide you through. So it's not like they're going to just throw something at you and ask you to figure out the solution to this paradox. They're going to give leading questions so that you go in the right direction. But the most important thing is to ensure that you can present how you think, because that's, I think, the most important part of all of Oxford's education, is that they teach you how to think. That sounds a bit scary. They teach you critical ways of looking at things, right? You won't always get the answer. Sometimes you'll be completely wrong. But what's important is that you thought about it in a way that makes sense, so that if you had problems in how you thought about it, that can be picked up, right? And that's what they really look for, because Oxford's teaching is done in terms of tutorials. Tutorials are like, there's one teacher and there'll be 1, 2, or 3 students. That's it. For 1 hour, you just talk to a world expert on your topic with just 2 other students. And sometimes I had like just 1 other student. And in those environments, what's most important is that they see that you're going to survive in an environment like that. And the best way to show that you can survive is to show that you can think, right? And so even when you have no idea what to say, even when you have no idea what the answer is, what's going through your mind, just say it out loud, so that they can still credit it, like partial marking, right? Yeah, those are the main 3 things that I think I hadn't covered yet. Hope you guys apply, hope you guys do well. I'm no longer there, but if you need any help, feel free to message me or something like that. Thank you, Siam.
Thank you so much for sharing all this. I hope this reaches a lot of people and helps them in their Oxford application. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on the show.